so we can get started, and if people come in as we move forward, they can just have a seat and catch up. Welcome, thank you for coming. This is our second college panel. We did it for the first time last year in many, many years. It was really very informative and successful. So we've invited some of the people who were here last year back, and then a few new members. So this is Miss Julie Murgillo from Sacred Heart, Kathy Lynch from Rockland Community College, Veronica Wyman from SUNY Oneonta, Julio A. Torres Jr. from Marist College, Anne Rotunda from Manhattan College, and Dan McDermott from Fordham University. And they're going to go through a variety of topics, such as for the application process, such as the transcript, the essay, letters of recommendation, test optional, what am I missing? The intangibles throughout the college process, and a few other things. Feel free, they'll talk, but feel free, at the end to ask questions. That's what they're here for, and they'll be more than happy to help you in any way. And they really are providing a lot of useful, informative information that will help you and your student throughout the whole college search process and throughout high school. So if you have a freshman or a sophomore and you're here, it's really not too early, because a lot of the things they will touch on have to do with starting throughout high school and what you need to eventually be accepted into college. Okay? Start with the transcript. She's excellent. She's excellent. Yeah, what the colleges are looking at, and you're looking at the transcript in general. It's not necessarily specific to Oneonta.
So starting off with the college transcript, there's a couple different pieces, and if anybody else has things from their institution that they want to add throughout, feel free to throw things in. But there's a couple different pieces that we're looking at. So the first would be the overall cumulative GPA that's going to be printed on the transcript. And that is just one piece though. So we're also going to be looking at, for freshman, sophomore, junior, and what the student is currently enrolled in senior year, the strength of the curriculum. So what types of classes were they taking? If the school offered AP or college in the high school courses, did students take advantage of them? Are there areas where it seems like they really excelled? Are they definitely a really strong math and science student? Do they excel in the humanities? Things like that. So we're going to take a look at really what the strength of the curriculum was. For schools that do offer Regents exams, we do look at them at SUNY Oneonta. For schools where Regents exams are not offered, that's okay. It's not required for the admissions process for us. And if anybody else wants to touch on what they do with those, you can as well. Another piece that comes with every applicant, along with their transcript, is the high school profile. So that comes right from the guidance office here at Albertus Magnus, and that just gives us a better feel for the curriculum that's offered at the high school, the total enrollment, the population at the school. So in addition to the transcript, we do get that piece as well. Is there anything?
You all have a fabulous guidance staff here. Missy and Casey do a really great job with pairing the transcript alongside the high school report, but their letters too are usually complimenting to the students in what they have shown progress in. One thing I like about Albertus's transcripts a lot is it gives a cumulative GPA for the year and cumulative GPA for the past 3 years. So a lot of times we get questions about, well, what if I had 1 year where I struggled, or I took a class with a teacher that I didn't do well in? You can see that progress sometimes. So every year does count. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, every year is important in the review process. And we don't want to see that you're obviously slacking off in your senior year or catching any bit of senioritis. But what's nice too is if you did start off with a little bit of a struggle, but then made that improvement from that B student to that B plus, and then maybe by your junior year in 1 or 2 AP classes, and that almost A student, and then in your senior year really challenging yourself, your transcript shows that here. So trust your guidance staff too to help you with that.
And let me preference with everything that we're going to say up here is going to be in general or specific to our institutions, but every single institution is different. So I would encourage you to ask every question you're going to ask us or every question we cover here to every institution that you're looking at. because we all read differently. We all consider different things. There are colleges that will recalculate your GPAs. There are colleges that won't. There's colleges that will look more favorably upon core curriculum. There are colleges that won't. There's colleges that won't consider Regis. There's colleges that do. So you want to just make sure that you are aware of what your specific institutions that you're applying to are looking for, and your school's guidance staff, or school counselor staff, excuse me, is amazing at that. They'll know that, and they have relationships with a lot of institutions.
So I guess I'll go next, since the second part of the review that we usually get asked about is standardized test scores, SATs, ACTs, and oftentimes too, those schools that you might be applying to that are test optional. How many parents in the room have juniors here at Albertus? Okay, with those hands still up, how many parents have had their junior take the SAT prior to March 1st? So you had your sons or daughters take the old version? Okay. So the old version of the SAT, or the previous version that was out of 2,400 and had 3 sections, is sort of being called apples now, and the new version is oranges. By June of 2016 this year, the College Board should be getting a new conversion chart to us. So we will have a reference of, based on the 2,400 point score, how to now translate that to a 1,600 point score. If they choose to, they can submit both, or to some of the universities they're applying to, or they can just submit one. But one thing that you might want to take into consideration is super scoring from both tests is not going to be allowed. So they can't take their highest math from the first score and then their highest English from the second score. If they take it after the new test now, they can only take one. So if they retake it again in, say, September or October of their senior year, since that's the same orange, they can use those scores for schools that are requiring test scores. At Sacred Heart, and at many of the institutions up here at the table, we do not require test scores for admission. We are Division I, so sometimes students will submit them for athletics reviews, but it's not required for admission purposes. Some of our programs like to see or recommend certain scores on the SAT if you've not met minimum GPA standards. For instance, our physical therapy and our nursing programs have a minimum GPA of a 3.5. If you have below a 3.5, they like to see SATs or around an 1100. We only look at 2-part critical reading and math sections, and ACT of a 24. Now the ACTs are different because there's 5 sections to the ACT, and you're looking at a composite score of all 5. So you'll take a writing section, you'll take an English section, you'll take a science section. For those learners that are good at science, I sometimes recommend the ACTs, or if they're considering a health science field and they feel the SAT wasn't a favorable test for them, ACT is a great way to go to. And then there's math section, and then there's also one more, I believe, comprehensive reading section too. So the composite score is what most colleges are looking at, meaning the overall. Test optional universities can be found on a website called fairtest.org. There's over 900 of them now in the United States. Skidmore just joined the ranks last week. GW is on there for now over a year. I know Marist is on there with us. So if you feel your transcript is strong enough and you've done well academically, and that those standardized test scores don't reflect the best you, you do not have to submit them to the university, and we will, at Sacred Heart, we won't ask for them. As I say, when they're recommended, it might help your application if you're on the cusp with the GPA, but it never would be used to your disadvantage there too.
So, and regarding those 900 SAT optional, test optional institutions, they all do things differently. So there's some schools that are test optional where you have to submit a paper, some you have to submit some type of written documentation. So you want to ask those institutions, what is it in lieu of, if anything? At Marist, we are test optional, and we don't require anything in lieu of the test scores. So if you submit them, they can be used both positively or negatively in your application. If you don't submit them, they can't do anything. So it really is your choice. And for those that have little test anxiety, I'm just going to give you a couple of tidbits of information. There's about 30 years of research that suggests the #1 predictor of how a student does at the next level is how they did during their 3 years in high school, not how they did on a random test on a Saturday for 3 hours. So, with that, you want to take the test, but again, you have to look at the schools you're applying for and see how important they rank those tests. Give you another tidbit. I read a student maybe about 3 years ago now that had a 2350 on the 3-part SAT. 50 points from perfection. Anybody want to guess what their GPA was? This is interactive, by the way. Okay, lower than a 2. Anyone else? They had a 67 average. So again, and I've seen, and I'm sure we've all seen, valedictorians of certain institutions that don't test well. So it is one piece of the puzzle at various institutions, but again, you want to ask those institutions how valuable a piece it is at their specific institution. And I'll defer to my colleagues if they want to chime in on that.
Hi, I'm going to talk a little bit about the essay. So Fordham, where I work, high number of applications that come in. We had 44,600 this year, right? So there's plenty of students that have the same GPA, plenty of students that have the same SAT or ACT scores. So the way to put your face on the application and really put who you are in your application is in the essay, right? So I want to give you a couple of pointers here. You want to make sure to proofread, right? There's so many students that take SAT prep courses all summer and work hard every day in school, and then they do one draft of their essay and send it in. It has typos, mistakes, things like that. Avoid the typos, right? If you're doing the Common App goes to every school you're applying. So if you do the essay for them, every school sees the same essay. We had a girl who applied a few years ago that the last line of her essay that she sent to us from the Common App was, and that's why I want to go to NYU, to Fordham University. I hope NYU took her, because we did not. So you want to definitely look it over. You want to be aware that everyone is seeing the same essay. So there is the Common App. If you're doing that, that's going to go to everyone. Some schools have individual essays. So you want to take a look at that and kind of do a couple of drafts of them, right? You want to ask your teachers, your guidance counselors, a few people to look it over. The more eyes that look it over, the better it is. Don't rely on just Microsoft Word. I had a colleague a few years ago who had a young lady who wrote all about doing community service and working in a nursing home with the elderly. Except she kept writing, she worked as a candy stripper instead of a candy striper. Don't know what kind of HMO plan that is, but she must have just relied on Microsoft Word, and stripper was spelled correctly, so she just sent it in. And she had this wonderful story to tell, but it looks not great because she didn't even know how to spell what she was doing. So you want to leave us with a great impression of who you are, right? So make sure you proofread. The second one is, that tale of every person is a unique snowflake. Show us who you are as a snowflake, right? There's so many people that go with cliche essays. Please don't write about grandma coming from the old country and having 7 kids and working 4 jobs. Grandma sounds great. I think I can get her into Fordham, but who are you? Maybe you can talk about how grandma inspired you or your relationship with her. You want to know who you are, what your dreams are, what your aspirations are. Why should we let you on the campus? What kind of a person are you going to be on campus, right? Because when you think of it, you're only spending about 15 hours a week in class. The rest of the time is helping you develop into the man or woman you want to be. So we want to see if that early start is there and what we can help you develop and grow into. So make sure you proofread and make sure that you inject your personality so we know who you are beyond just the test scores and your GPA.
All right, so a key part of determining what school is going to be the best one for you is determining fit. And the way that you're really going to gauge fit is the campus visit. So I get to talk about the fun part, getting on a campus. So by show of hands, how many of you have visited a college campus before? About 80%. So my recommendation is that you visit as many college campuses as you can. Visit a big school, a medium-sized school, a small school. Ask to meet with a faculty member. Ask to shadow a student, sit in on classes. So at Manhattan College, we offer information sessions twice daily. So those are pretty standard, but it's encouraged and it's pretty often that students ask to do something in addition to the typical campus visit. So perhaps you want to meet with a faculty member from the business department or engineering, or you want to shadow a student for a day, or you want to ask if you can get lunch on campus. It's really important that you try to make your visit as catered to your needs as possible. In your packet, you got a questions to ask college representatives. It's really important that you ask questions when you're visiting campuses. Ask good questions. There's a lot of information out on the internet. There's a lot of brochures coming home to your mailbox. But the best way to get the feel, to get the energy, the temperature of a campus is to get your feet on it. And finally, it's important that you let the Office of Admissions know that you're coming for the visit, that you leave with a business card with a contact in the office. So all of us brought our business cards here today. We want to know who's coming to our campus. We want to stay in touch with you. We want to work with you through the admissions process. So it's important that you leave with all of your questions answered, that you've seen the residence halls, that you've checked out the fitness center, whatever it is that's going to be important to you in making your 4 years there your home.
I think Ann touched on a really good point too, that asking questions is important, and taking notes, or even maybe creating a little slideshow in your iPhone for yourself of all the places you've been, because you might visit 5, 6, or 10 colleges. You might not end up applying to all those colleges, but when you sit down to work on those applications, you might forget what Fordham looked like and what Marist looked like, or what Sacred Heart looked like, or did Rockland County have big lecture halls? So it helps to take pictures yourself, or take notes about what they say their student-to-teacher ratio is, and ask those questions about how accessible your advisor is. Think about the fact that you're making a 4-year investment, and it's about you when you're there, not just what the university has, but what you can get from it.
And speaking of not only the campus visit, I'm going to touch on just really quickly something called demonstrated interest. So I don't know many campuses who take horrible pictures of their campuses and students on those brochures. We all have wonderful brochures in the fall with very attractive people in them at all the times. At all schools. It never snows in Syracuse and Buffalo, and it's always sunny in New York City. We are masters at that. So you want to get on the campuses, but also when we come to you, whether it's the high school visit or whether it's the college fairs, connect with us. Those wonderful inquiry cards are not just for mailings. They also, for some colleges, track how many times they've seen you. And if that college engages in demonstrated interest, that could be a make or break for a student with certain institutions. So you want to get to know us. At the small and mid-sized schools, which most of us are, you will have access directly to your territory manager or the person who's responsible for your area. At the much larger schools, that may not be the case. So you want to reach out to us. You want to be engaged. You don't need to send us an email every day. I think the most emails I ever got was about 60 from one student. But you do want to stay engaged in the process, especially if you're a sophomore or junior at this point. You have a year, 2 years to really get into that process and go as part of those intangibles, as it were.
All right. I'm Dr. Katie Lynch. I'm from Rockland Community College. I run the honors program there. And so I get to say some things that are a little bit different from what everyone else is saying, because we don't have any kind of essay that's required. We don't have any kind of GPA that's required. As you probably know, RCC is an open admissions institution. And so for the most part, we accept almost everyone, barring some sort of legal difficulty, which I hope no one has. And so I'm going to say a little bit about RCC, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the honors program, and then of course I'm happy to answer any questions. So many of you may be familiar with what RCC has to offer, but there are really a wide variety of programs there. Everything from programs in business, where you can get an associate's degree in business, to occupational therapy, to nursing, to liberal arts degrees, math, science, English, social science, any kind of humanities, art, all kinds of programs that the college offers, things with the students that we encounter. And I think the honors program that's especially true for the honors program. So again, many of you may be familiar with the honors program. I brought a list of our recent graduates who were Albertus Magnus grads and honors program graduates. I just want to point out two whom I know, who I worked with, prior to becoming head of the honors program, because I also teach in the English department, and so while I was teaching in the English department, I ran into Andrew Luisi a lot. He was working in the writing center. Does anybody know Andrew? Yeah, great. He's a great guy. He ended up transferring to Wake Forest, which is a fantastic school and has probably the best mascot I've ever heard. I'm sorry, everybody. The Demon Deacon. Right? I mean, what's better than a demon deacon? I don't know. So that's Andrew. He did fantastic, right? I mean, it's a great school, and so he did very well for himself. Then there's Karen Dietrich. Did anybody know Karen? All right, yeah, she's wonderful, and she ended up transferring to Cornell from us. So you can go anywhere. Now, these two students are particularly strong, and so I want to do real talk, as they say. In order to transfer to a top school, you have to have a very high GPA in the honors program. We're talking, certainly a 3.5, which is our minimum to give you honors designation on your diploma. But really, these students are looking at more like a 3.7 or a 3.8. And you also have to be highly involved in extracurricular activities, of which RCC offers many. And I can tell you more about that if you're curious. Okay, so that's the connection to Albertus. The honors program currently offers 2 degrees, 2 tracks. They're both liberal arts tracks. One is for math and science, the other is for humanities and social science. The point of those tracks is to prepare the student for general curricular kinds of concerns. So we're giving you your year of natural science, or 2 if you're in the math and science program. We're giving you a year of foreign language if you're in the humanities and social science program. You're going to take some social science classes, an entire year of honors English. You'll take math. And you'll be able to also have some electives. So all of our degrees do have built into them some choice, so that you can, take something that you're passionate about. And then after that, you transfer to the institution of your choice where you're accepted, and we have had a high success rate at having most of those credits transferred. Now, if a student who comes to the honors program is looking at a particular school and is really passionate about a particular school or schools, what we do is we advise them to look at what that school requires, and then we can help tailor their time in our degree program so that their credits will transfer more efficiently. So that leads me to the next part, which is when you come into the honors program and you're accepted by the honors program, you receive a faculty mentor. That faculty mentor is an experienced teacher. They're all award winners, and they work with your student one-on-one, however often that student needs, and they really shepherd them through the process. And so that mentor is generally someone who writes letters of recommendation when your student is ready to transfer, and they're there for any concerns. Often they end up being a teacher to your student, and so that's a really powerful connection and a way that we're able to have a successful program. In addition to moving through that degree and completing the honors requirements, what you need to do to get through that degree and graduate with an honors distinction is to take a minimum of 8 honors courses, to do an internship or a study abroad program, and then also you have to attend a transfer seminar that we offer that's mandatory, that teaches students how to use the Common App if they don't have experience doing that already. It teaches them a little bit about the difference between the questions that they needed to answer as freshmen, if they applied as freshmen, and the essay that they need to answer, respond to as a transfer student. And then finally, they need to do an internship. Did I say internship or study abroad? Did I do that already? Okay, good. So we're all squared away. Minimum of 3.5 GPA, which is what I already mentioned. So I'll stop there, and I'll add my 2 cents in as everyone else is speaking. But if you have any questions at all about RCC, I'm very happy to answer them. And like many of the schools here, we do allow you to come in to meet with me, to sit in on a class, and we'd love to have you do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We are going to open up to questions, but I'm going to raise a few points that are questions that we get a lot in our office. And I know we talked about the transcript and the strength of the transcript, but could we just discuss a little bit more about honors courses and AP courses, and what our school in particular, we may not offer as many, and students have to be recommended and placed. And it's always a big concern of parents that their transcript isn't going to be strong enough. So I just wanted to touch a little bit more on that component of the transcript and how you guys will weigh in on the strength of the transcript and Albertus. That make sense?
I'll start. So, sure, we're looking numerically at a number on your transcripts. The benchmark that we may need at institutions to get into certain programs or to even just be admitted to the general university might vary. But what you also have to consider too, as Missy's saying, is the breadth of the classes that you're taking. You don't have to take all honors in AP to have a strong transcript. Certainly if there's an interest in one area, if you are a math and science person and you choose to double up in the APs and honors there, and then, English is you still do well in those classes, you still get your A's, but even in the Regents level classes or in the general classes, that shows that you still have a strong transcript there. The point is to take advantage of as many opportunities as you can that are offered to you. If you can get into or get a recommendation for 1 or even 2 on AP courses, challenge yourself, because that's going to prepare you for the next level, and it's definitely going to get you a little out of your comfort zone. And when you go to our institutions, then those credits might transfer. If you take the AP exam, sometimes schools will take 3. At Sacred Heart, we take 4s. If you do take the AP exam there too. But I know with also certain level college courses that you can take through RCC here, those carry over not only to RCC, but to other institutions as well if you do well in them. Usually a B or higher at Sacred Heart is what we're looking for. Some schools might take a C. But then think about too that path there of what you might be interested in studying, or just challenge yourself of what your interests are. When you get to your senior year, it's important still to remain engaged and connected in classes. It's not the time to start taking basket weaving 101, which I don't think they offer anyway. But you still should have a strong curriculum in there. You continue with your math and science if you're thinking about going into health studies field. It's important to still take an English and maybe even to a statistics class as well to coincide with what you might be looking to study.
Yeah, I'd say at Fordham, we want you to take as challenging a curriculum as you can successfully handle. So that is a conversation that you have with your counselors. You have great counselors here. If there are AP classes offered, if there are IB, other schools, honors classes, we want you to take them, but we don't want you to get in over your head. At another school, there was a young lady who I had a conversation with the counselor, and she was like, she was a good math student, but she insisted on being an AP Calc, and her mom pushed and put her in there, and she went from an A student in honors math to getting a C minus in AP Calc, and it kind of blew her chances there, right? Because we like that students want to take those challenging courses, but it's also a conversation with your teachers that you had in that subject and your guidance staff to say, can I successfully handle this, right? We want you to challenge yourself, but we don't want you to kind of kill your GPA and drown yourself with that. So it's a balance and it's a conversation with these wonderful support staff you have.
Yeah, just to echo my colleagues also, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record by the end of this, but again, you have to speak to the institutions you are looking at. Because one institution might say, hey, 1 honors is phenomenal. Another institution may say, well, that's below our minimums. So you want to be doing the best you can with what you have. Because you have to remember, at many of our institutions, you're not just competing against students from Albertus. You're not competing against students from New York. You're competing against students from all over the world for seats in all of these institutions, and they all have different grading systems and educational systems. Our job is to make sure that we are enrolling a talented group of people, not a talented group of numbers, into our institutions. So we're looking at a lot of different things when we're looking at institutions and looking at coursework. But you want to challenge yourself as much as you can and think outside the box. So maybe if you weren't recommended for an honors or an AP, that doesn't preclude you from signing up for a course outside of here at RCC during the summer, taking a summer course and saying, well, maybe I'll do this just for fun or see how I can challenge myself. You want to start thinking about how to better yourself. I had a coach who once told me there's no such thing as a failed opportunity if you take Meaning, whether you succeed at it or fail at it, you're still better off for doing it. Now, again, with that said, you want to make sure that you're involving your school counselors, parents, in that discussion as you go through what's best for you.
May take away all your questions. The next one that we get often is about extracurricular activities and how much they weigh into the admissions process. So, just to give an example, sometimes, we have a student who might be, a high C student and say, but I do this, 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 and this, that's going to carry me over into admissions. So I just think it's important if you guys can touch on where extracurriculars play into your admissions decisions.
So
Clubs, community service, community.
So this is an answer that I think is going to be vastly different at a variety of institutions. So you definitely want to ask these questions while you're doing your campus visit, if that's something that you think is going to play a big role in your application process. So speaking just to SUNY Oneonta, we definitely read holistically. So I look at all the activities the student participated in, whether it was athletics, community service, dance, plays in high school, musical ensembles, all of that is considered. But at the end of the day, I'd always say there's 5 pieces that we look at when we're reading the application. So the transcript, the standardized test scores, the essay, the letters of recommendation, and the extracurriculars. For us, the standardized test scores and the strength of curriculum, high school GPA, what the student did academically in high school, is typically weighted most heavily. So while we consider all the other pieces, they don't carry as high of a weight in the review process as those other 2 pieces do. But that's just for our campus, and that is going to be something that's very different all across the board.
When it comes to extracurricular activities at Manhattan College, we are really looking for quality over quantity. So what that means is that we are not impressed by students who have signed up for every club and activity and tried every athletic team that Albertus has ever had to offer. Not that I think I've seen that, but what I'm trying to get to is if you have been in 2 or 3 consistent sports, clubs, activities, that is something that is going to hold a lot of weight for us. And again, we take a holistic approach, so we're looking at everything.
I'm sure I'll have some more questions, but I'm going to open it up to you guys and see if you have any parents or students have any questions that they'd like to ask, and I'll come down and give you the mic.
We'd love to hear from students that are in the audience. This is about you
guys. This might not apply specifically to any one of the schools in the panel, but do you have any advice for a student from Albertus who may be applying to another state school outside of New York State that may increase their chances of being enrolled in a, let's say a North Carolina state school or another state school where they take predominantly in-state, but now you're trying as an out-of-state student to get in?
You can probably guess what my advice will be. Come here first. So, and I know, yes, good. I love the chuckles. Thank you. So just to say a piece on that. I mean, we had 2 students last year who transferred to Chapel Hill, to UNC Chapel Hill. We've had a lot of success with students transferring to other state schools, and so, and even if you're thinking inside the state, even SUNY Binghamton, right, which in many respects thinks of itself as the flagship of the SUNY system, great school. It's very difficult to get in as a freshman. We have already seen this year a lot of students being accepted by Binghamton as transfer students. So that is one answer, and the great part about this is that your student can apply to the schools that they really want to get into, and if they don't get to the school that they want now, come to us, come to the honors program specifically, and we'll do our best to help them get into the school that they really have as their dream school at a later point.
And it never says anywhere on their diploma from Chapel Hill or Wake Forest or Marist or Sacred Heart or Fordham, wherever they decide to go, an asterisk under their name that says, oh, by the way, they went to RCC first for a year. It doesn't matter if they go there for a year. You know, I think that's one thing that you have to realize. It's not about the start, it's about the finish. And if you have a goal in mind, it might take a different path than you anticipated, but it's still attainable to you if you're willing to put in the work for it. So remember that too.
Will anyone have any advice pertaining to the actual question, which is if they don't want to do RCC, does anyone have any input for that? If you don't, that's fine. I'm just curious.
I think that goes into the intangibles. I think all institutions are looking to accept students from a wide variety of places. So with UNC Chapel Hill, they get hundreds of thousands of applications and all of that. So I don't know if that was your specific one. But, you know, advice would be reach out to that school specifically. You know, I mean, I'll speak for Marist, for instance. We get applications from all over the globe. So, and when we get applications from places we haven't either visited or have any clue how they find us, we'll reach out to them and say, how'd you find us? What are the things that brought you to us? So it may be the same thing for that institution. I always like to also say there's a lot of intangibles that are involved in this process, but the moment you, as a family, start trying to strategize a way in or out, you've lost the war. Because the strategy changes. You know, and I hope I can speak for all of my colleagues here where, you know, when we go into a season, we may not even know what the strategy is for that upcoming year. So it's one of those things, first and foremost, transcript. Second, what's your interest level? What are the things you're doing for that institution? And do you fit that institution's guidelines per se? Now, all of our institutions, and I think there's something like 4,500 institutions in the United States, give you a guideline for a reason, because we are, again, trying to enroll people, not just numbers. So there are extenuating circumstances for transcripts or extracurriculars or where you're coming from or what you had to go through. So again, the advice would be do everything you think you need to do and then ask your school counselors, ask the reps. You know, a lot of times when we're at college fairs, students will bypass our tables. You know, if you're at the Westchester Fair that's happening in a couple of weeks, there's going to be something like 300 colleges there. There's no way you're going to be able to go through all of that in the time that they give. Ask us. We'll be able to say, well, I don't have that program, but Oneonta does. Or Oneonta doesn't have that program, but Fordham does. Or Sacred Heart has it. You know, that's what we do. So use us as a resource as well. Does that kind of answer that?
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep, come on. Need roller skates.
How important is the interview process? Is it always is it for every school? Is there an interview, or like how important is it?
Does anybody up here with an interview? Okay. So from my perspective, from the honors program perspective, when first you must apply to RCC. And then you must apply to the honors program, and what you're applying for is the chance to interview with us. So we do have an interview as part of our admissions process to the honors program. RCC does not have an interview itself. So just so you're aware of that. So as somebody who has gone through an interview for various schools when I was applying, and as someone who's seen many transfer students over the past few years do interviews, if you're offered one by a school, you should absolutely take it. Absolutely. And the reason for that is twofold. First of all, that person who's interviewing you, they have instructions. Sometimes they have a form that they need to fill out, and they're going to be an extra voice, hopefully advocating for you to achieve admission to the institution. And the second reason is that you find out more about the school that way. So my wife went to Harvard, and she also interviewed at MIT. But so not interviewed at MIT, there was an MIT interviewer, right? So someone who graduated from MIT interviewed her about MIT. And the guy was not nice. And, you know, she was kind of put off at first. And he said, well, okay, you know, I see you've taken all these classes, great. I've seen you done this, I've seen you do that. You know, everybody at MIT is the valedictorian. Everybody at MIT had a 4.0. What makes you so special? Now, my wife looked at the person and said, is everyone at MIT the captain of their basketball team? And, you know, she shot right back at him, right? So you have to be confident in yourself. Now, I'm not saying this to scare you, okay, because I don't want to frighten you, but sometimes you will not you're not going to always get along in this really wonderful way with your interviewer. So be confident in your own accomplishments. Practice little sound bites talking about, you know, what you've done. Practice them in front of the mirror. Practice them to your family dog. Practice them to a friend or to a sibling, so that you're ready. So that you're ready to talk about you and that you're confident. And those are the pieces of advice I can give.
So we do not require an interview at Oneonta, but we will interview students if you would like to come to campus and sit down with the admissions staff and be interviewed. There's two situations where I think it can be advantageous to a student to go through the interview process. The first is if they're kind of right on the bubble. The middle 50% for our academic GPA from the incoming freshman class for the prior year and our standardized test scores. It does give us a chance to put a face to the application, learn a little bit more about the student, and allow the student to really advocate for themselves through the interview process. Another situation is if your student has any extenuating circumstances. So if they suffered an illness in high school that maybe made them miss 3 months of high school, that's not something that if the student doesn't present it in the application, we'll always know. So if you did experience any types of situations like that, that is a good time to come to campus and kind of let us know about those situations as well, just so we are able to consider that in the application process.
At Sacred Heart, we require interviews for our early decision applicants and our physical therapy applicants if you're applying to our 6 or 7 year physical therapy program, or 5 or 6 year occupational therapy program. We do like to have an interview with you. You don't always have to come to campus for the interview. However, we are open in the summer and do a lot of interviews over the summer. But I also do interviews here in the fall, usually in late November, and then multiple times people at the menu at Panera, I think, sometimes want to kick me out with the number of days in a row that they'll see me there doing interviews. So if you're looking at one of our dual degree bachelor's to master's or bachelor's to doctorate program for the PT and OT tracks, or if you're thinking Sacred Heart for early decision, you will be expected to interview.
So at Marist, we don't require interviews unless it's for our higher education opportunity program or our special services program. But we're more than willing to speak with you at any time. When you come to visit us, when we come here, anytime you see myself, I'm happy to be the person that reads for Albertus. Just ask, how I'm doing. Interact with me. Let me know who you are and what your interests are. So that way I can get to know you a little bit better. And then, like you stated earlier, we're your advocates in the application process. So while we don't have at Marist a formal interview process, I more than welcome the opportunity to sit down and just have a conversation about whatever you'd like with the institution, or sports or whatever you like. I think sometimes also at the menu at Panera they want to kick me out as well, because I will invite students there just for coffee, just to find out more. And also another thing I want to point out, there are institutions that will do alumni interviews. If they do that, you want to take them up on that as well, because that may be the only type of interview that they do.
Questions?
This question is for Dr. Lynch. Again, sorry. I was concerned if the student was hesitant or concerned about going into the honors program the first year, if they could transfer into the honor program the second year, or if it's a 2-year program from whenever they begin it.
That's a great question, thanks. You can enter the honors program at any point, so if you're not a strong enough student to enter the honors program when you matriculate at RCC, you can enter after your first semester as long as you've achieved a 3.5 GPA or higher. And what we try to do at the end of each semester is run the list of students who have achieved that and reach out to them. But students are also welcome to reach reach out to us. Our door is, almost always open, and we love hearing from people who are interested. In addition, we have a great set of faculty who will often recommend students for the honors program. And so the faculty member sees a student doing very well in their class and then brings them in. So yes, at any point, the student is welcome to enter.
Anyone else?
My question is also to Dr. Lynch, and maybe part two of your question. Is it still 2 years? So let's say you're not in the honors program and then you transfer into that. Is it still, do you still do 2 years there, or is it an additional 2 years?
So that is going to vary depending on what the student has done so far, and also how long the student has been there. So the optimal situation, if you haven't started in the honors program, is that you come into us after 1 semester. That's really the ideal situation. The honors program, since it requires 8 honors classes, you would have to spend some extra time probably if you came after a full year, simply because doing 4 honors classes each semester is not something I recommend to most people. And they're quite rigorous classes. They involve a lot of writing in particular, a lot of research papers, even in the sciences. Our honors biology, for example, requires a research paper. So while some students are capable of that, generally if someone's transferring into the program, they might need a little extra mentoring potentially. And so we'll try to work with the student, absolutely, but we may have a conversation about whether or not it's a good idea for them to stay an extra year. Now that being said, let's say the student really wants to go at the end of 2. What we would then do with the student is say, okay, you will not receive honors designation on your diploma because you haven't gotten to that 8 honors classes minimum. But you'll still receive notification on your diploma and on your transcript that you are a participant in the honors program. The same is true for someone who does not quite manage that 3.5. Let's say they're at a 3.4, and to be honest, I've seen a 3.49, and I've said, I'm sorry, we have to draw the line somewhere, and this is the line. And that's a hard conversation, by the way. I don't like that conversation. But, that person still gets, credit for participating in the program on their transcript, and certainly they've engaged in many honors classes. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Can I just ask one question? Okay, so let's say, is the timeliness of trying to get into the honors program the same thing as, let's say, applying to, let's say, a 4-year school? Can you apply, let's say my son already knows he might want to do this, and they want to apply and just forego applying to other schools. This is just totally off the cuff. Is it the same time frame, or can you do it and just have it out of the way so you have your options?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do it at any point. Once RCC starts accepting applications for whatever semester you want to enter, you can start applying to the honors program as well. Okay, so that's already happened for the fall, and we have lots of people who are already applying for the fall. The one thing I would say is that we will accept people up through the add-drop period. Through the first week of class, we will accept people. Now, we really strongly recommend that you do not wait that long, but sometimes, what happens is the student will go away to school, and they'll realize that this is not for them, or they'll get very homesick, and then RCC is able to sort of catch them and provide them with a place to get some work done while they figure out what they really want to do next. And so we will make every effort to accept a student who's qualified through that add-drop period of the first week of class. Unfortunately, what's going to happen in that situation is that most of the honors classes will be closed, they'll be full by that point, and so the sooner you can apply, the better. Our first registration session, where students will actually get to register for courses for the fall, will be on May 17th. And so if you have a senior and they know that they want to come to RCC, then they should apply as soon as possible, because there's the matter of placement tests and making sure they have an interview for the honors program and all of that. But we accept people throughout the summer, so we don't have quite the same timeline as everyone else.
Thank you.
I think Albertus needs to invest in a few more mics.
I was just curious. I heard that playing an instrument is a key aspect in being like a rounded student, but that's not really where my interests are. How do you think I could make up for not playing an instrument?
I'm glad you brought that question up, because we get those type of questions from a lot of students. So I heard this thing is the best thing. I heard that thing is the best thing. There is no best thing. It is what works for you. So, for instance, if you are, I have students who, they were best at design, so they did that. Or I have students who were best at sports, they did that. Or I have students who are best at being caretakers for their family members, they did that. You have to focus on what you do well, what you're passionate about, what makes you tick. You know, many times all of us hear from students who, well, I'm doing this because I heard colleges like that. We like people who are passionate about what they want to do. If you're not passionate about piano, please don't sit there and do piano lessons for 10 years. You know, it's not your thing. If you are, that's awesome. If you're passionate about, you know, design or programming or, you know, studying, whatever it is, follow that as you go through. Because I can promise you, I don't think, and I may be speaking ahead for my colleagues, you know, we haven't accepted or denied a kid based on one thing. Whether that's a test score, a GPA, a talent, it's more than just that one thing.
I can piggyback on top of that a little bit. At Manhattan College, I think it happens to be really cool when a student's involved in a club or activity that is aligned with the program they're applying into. So if you're applying to a civil engineering program or a mechanical engineering program and you're in the robotics club, I think that's awesome. We want to see students who are pursuing and spending their time in activities that complement the field that they plan on studying and plan on pursuing a career in. So if you're thinking you like accounting or fashion or whatever it might be, see if there's a club or activity here or in the community, or start one. Plenty of students have started clubs or activities to show us that you're doing things that are of interest to you.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question about the essays. Is it better to do something, a funny essay or something that's happened in your life? And have the prompts changed for this year?
They changed this past year. They said they'll change them up a bit. Don't think they're going to change them up that soon for next year. I would say if you are a funny person, go ahead and show your personality. Funny. I would definitely, if you think your essay is funny, show a couple of other people, especially someone who maybe doesn't know you, to say, hey, is this funny? Because there are plenty of people that try and be funny, they're not, and it just comes off as an awkward one or awful stories that they're sharing. So make sure it's appropriate for someone who has the next 4 years of their life in front of them. So make sure it's an appropriate story that I'd enjoy reading. So show as many people as possible. Like I said, show someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your sense of humor. Say like, hey, you don't know me, can you read this and tell me the sense you get? So if you do comedy well, great, I love a good laugh, but make sure it's appropriate.
Actually, I have an anecdote I can share. We don't take an essay, but I have an anecdote I can share from a admissions rep from Skidmore whom I met. And he gave a great example, and I've used it for my students as well. And he said, we once had this great essay about broccoli. And it made the rounds of the admissions office because it was so good. The essay was all about why I won't eat broccoli anymore. I refuse, right? And of course, that is kind of funny. It's treating a serious topic in a lighthearted way. What that essay is really about is not about broccoli at all. It's about asserting your independence, about becoming someone who owns what you love and what you don't love. And so he said, on the one hand, that was great. It was someone who was treating a serious topic in a lighthearted manner. It worked really well. On the other hand, the student misspelled broccoli every single time. Now, I asked him afterward, because he didn't say during the panel, I asked him afterward, I'm like, tell me about broccoli guy. Did he get in? Yes. Now, I was like, okay, this is great. This is good for me, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell my students this story, and I'm going to say, this is hopeful, because, you know, even if you misspell something, it doesn't mean the end of the world, but it doesn't look great, right? So that's, I think, a good lesson on both sides of the coin about, you know, using humor, but also making sure you proofread, as has already been said.
My question really, it's just, I'm asking for a bit of advice. If there's a student who's a strong student, but has not really narrowed down a path or trajectory just about at this point, and feels basically defeated in this process of applying because they feel like they haven't planned far ahead, you know, past tomorrow, what would you say to that student?
I'll take this. How many people in here when you were 17 or 18 knew exactly what you wanted to do? And how many people are doing that now? Okay, got one person. That's an answer. So, give you a couple of things. One, I would suggest that person apply to some liberal arts institutions. Two, nationally speaking, most students will change their major at least 3 times. 3, I was reading an article in the New York Times maybe about a year ago that said the average college graduate, 24 to 35, changes jobs every 2 years and careers every 3 years. Bureau of Labor Statistics backs this up and says the average college freshman on campuses right now will have 14 different careers by the time they retire. In addition, by 2020, there will be about 10 million jobs that aren't created yet. You're going to college to learn how to learn and do a lot of other things. For those that are lucky enough to know their path, whether it's medicine, whether it's engineering, whether it's computer science, phenomenal. I can tell you from my own experience, I changed my major 6 times. I have a degree in communications, public relations, a minor in business, and a certificate to coach basketball and soccer, and I'm an admissions professional. There's no major for that, okay? And I can guarantee you most of us in the profession of admissions didn't go to school to be in the admissions profession. So with that, that student's actually more on the quote-unquote normal side than the other side. We deal with students all the time who swear up and down they know exactly what they want to do. They take one class in it and it's done forever. Or they take an internship or they do whatever it is. I always tell students, find what you're passionate about. What are the things you enjoy doing? And see if you can learn more about that. If it's languages, if it's philosophy, if it's religion, if it's, you know, baseball, whatever it is, and see what you can do from that perspective. But you shouldn't feel defeated at this point. And to add to that, when you're going through the college process, your students aren't the only one going through it. Your parents are going through it too. So, you know, it's your number one, you know, thing that you care about the most in the world, and it's emotional. So as a family, you want to get together and start having some of those conversations, because I can guarantee you, there's colleges you want your students to go to, there's colleges they want to go to, and there's colleges neither of you will agree on. You know, I was on a panel about 2 years ago, and one of the panelists had a great suggestion. They said, parents, you pick 3 colleges. Students, you pick 3 colleges, and then agree on 3 colleges. And look at those colleges accordingly. So that way everyone's getting a say in how it's going. You know, because I can tell you again, and I hope I can speak for my colleagues on this, when we do college fairs, I'll be talking to the parent, and the parent will say, Marist is John's first choice, and John is 6 tables over. You know, so it's one of those things, we might be your first choice, but not your students, and vice versa. So you want to take that into consideration as you're going through the process, that it's a normal process, and you're going to have those moments as you go through.
Okay. Is there an average number of schools you feel students should apply to?
I would say that varies. I don't think it might be.
It does vary. I heard on a podcast this morning, a school in New Jersey, it didn't say if it was a charter school. They were getting fee waivers for this. The average student was applying to 22 to 24 schools. I think that is a little excessive, because that kind of comes from the second, you know, that comes from that question of, you know, we don't know what we're going to be majoring in, how many schools should we be looking at. You can put a certain experience or a certain thing that you're looking for in a school on it. You know, it might be, I'm going to look at schools of a certain size or of a certain radius or of a certain, type, state school, like you were asking before about state institutions versus liberal arts institutions versus institutions maybe that are 3 hours away, 5 hours away. I think it does help to, group some of the institutions as you're making that list. And then I like that idea of 3, 3, and 3. I think 9 is a very good number. 3 schools that might have a little bit out of the students' range, but as they call them, the reach schools, or it might be a challenge for them to get into. 3 schools that are right around their range and they feel really comfortable at, they feel really happy at, they can see themselves there, they fit in, they feel they fit the student population really well, and they like where it is, they like to be on the campus. And maybe 3 schools that, closer to home or their state options. I'm surprised we haven't gotten any questions about financial aid, so I'm going to plug that there and see if that opens up a can of worms that maybe we didn't want to get into. But 3 schools that maybe, affordability might be the factor there, and that you're looking at it as, RCC might be one of my 3, safety or, affordability schools, because I want to save some money first, my first 2 years, or really make sure I get my focus before I, make this type of investment. So that's a good way to look at it too, is sort of how you group your schools in that sense too.
There was a really interesting article in the New York Times on Tuesday of this week. I don't know if anyone saw it. It was about the Common Application online. Anyone? So the point of the article was how easy the Common App has made it for students to apply to an endless number of schools. And so what that's doing in the long run is, yes, simplifying the actual application process, but it's driving up the competition, where schools who were once not nearly as selective as they are now have had to become selective merely because of numbers. So really what my point and my takeaway from the article was that there really is no average. You should be applying to all the schools that you apply to, you should see yourself at. It is not worth submitting one application at a school that you don't think you would be 100% happy at. And I believe that you can find more than 3 schools that you'll be successful at, that you'll be happy at, that are financially affordable. Because if you just start applying endlessly to schools that you haven't visited, you know nothing about, you can't afford, it could potentially harm a student who's also applying from your school or a student somewhere else who may not get in because academically or whatever it might be, you look like a better candidate to the admissions committee. So there's no average, but you should only be applying to schools that you see yourself at.
Do we have,
For a letter of recommendation, how many is the one that shows you send in, and who should they
So I'm going to start with my standard answer. Every school is different. So for instance, some schools won't take letters of recommendation from teachers from the 9th, 10th, or even some for 11th grade. They only wanted to see people from 12th grade. Some will take from everywhere. Most institutions will do at least 2 recommendations. Some will do from a school counselor, guidance counselor, whoever it is at the institution, and 1 from an adult of your choice. Now I always tell people that's an adult of your choice minus Mom, Dad, Uncle Bob, Aunt Sue, Grandma, and Grandpa. This year at Marist, I think I got somewhere around 30 to 40 wonderful letters of recommendation from mothers all over the world. That may not be appropriate. So you want to look at, members of the clergy if that's important to you, supervisors, other teachers at the school, coaches, people that can really speak to your students' potential leadership qualities, those type of things. You also, for the students, don't go to the same teacher everybody's going to. I can tell you from personal experience in reading, some teachers they get so inundated, they write the same letter of recommendation, change the names. So it really is, find people that are interested in you, ask them early, ask them now. I wouldn't submit more than, 47 letters of recommendation. I've had 2 students do that. So I mean, it really is dependent upon that institution and what you're doing. In some institutions, they have specific requirements for that. And then that gets even more heightened as you're applying for different things. So to give you an example, if you're applying for medical school, they require one letter of recommendation, but from 9 people, at least, you know, some medical schools. So again, it really depends upon what you're trying to accomplish.
So not just the school, come from the community.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And one other thing you can do is think about, we require a minimum of 1 letter of recommendation from the school. So it has to be a guidance counselor or a teacher. But when you start asking people outside of the school, they're also all going to be able to offer different perspectives of your student. So a coach is going to be able to offer a very different perspective from a guidance counselor. An employer or a family that they maybe nannied or babysat for is going to talk about different qualities than their science teacher did. So it's nice to have a mix of letters of recommendation too, of both academic and people from outside of the school district, because it does kind of paint a broader picture of what the student is like.
Let me just add to that. Your school counselor recommendation for a lot of institutions is critical, because we're going to look at their recommendations because they know your students. So for those students, you might want to get to know your school counselors a little bit better as you go through, because some schools, that will be the primary one. So it really depends.
And they really deserve a hand, because, I mean, they really do a lot of good work here, so I think you guys believe in what they do. They take it.
By the way, we don't get paid to say that. Other questions?
I was just wondering, in regards to the essay, would you rather hear like more personal or like funny essay or a more professional essay? Or is it like kind of the prompt?
Did everybody hear that question? So the question was regarding the essay, would we prefer more professional or more personal? I would always say the essay is your opportunity for you to let me know who you are. I can see your transcript, I can see your activities, but I don't know who you are. So what you do is, I haven't seen a college yet turn down additional information about you. So if you want to do the professional, you know, college essay, but then submit something else, you're more than welcome to. I also say some colleges have optional writing assignments. I would say that for most places, they're not optional. Do them, because it can only help you. But as was stated before, if you're funny, write a funny essay. If you're not funny, don't write a funny essay. You know, I've had similar ones to the broccoli. I've had My Life is a Big Mac, which was a funny essay. I've had, you know, and I'm sure we could all quote different ones, but you just want to make sure that we get an opportunity to know you in a very small period of time. You know, most of us only have probably anywhere between, what, on average, 5 to 15 minutes at most to read an application in its entirety. So your opportunity is for us to get it to that next level.
1 or 2 more questions if we have anyone out there who has a question that they want to ask.
Back to the letters of recommendation, is it a good idea to get recommended by former alumni of Albertus? Or,
That's fine. You know, I would say...
or the institution, I think she meant the institution there.
Yeah, I mean, if you know alumni of our institutions, that's very helpful. If you have alumni, you know, from Albertus who come to institutions, that's also helpful. I mean, again, you just want to get recommendations from people who you know can talk about you.
It is always nice too, if you're going to go that route, to know the alumni or have a relationship with them, just so the letter is a little bit more than I went to college here with so-and-so's mother in 1986, and she was a really great person when I went there, and I'm sure her daughter's going to do great too. So you want to make sure if you're going to get an alumni letter that you do at least, the person has some context to speak to your abilities and why you would be a great asset to the campus, not just, I'm an alumni and I think she would be great. So make sure they have some things they can speak to in the letter as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the financial aid process, for the leaving hang, is that a separate and distinct process from anything regarding grants or scholarships, or is it all factored together?
So, is everyone aware that next year you will be able to start accessing FAFSA October 1st? Collective head, yes. Collective head? No, then I guess, okay. So the free application for federal student aid is going to be, it used to only be available post-January 1 of the year they are looking to enroll. Now it's going to be available October 1st of 2016 for those students who are looking to enroll fall of 2017 in college. The FAFSA is something that you file for federal aid. Almost all of the state and public institutions will require FAFSA, and pretty much every private institution will require it too for need-based aid. Some private schools will also require the CSS profile, and that is something that the College Board has. The CSS profile is any institutional aid that you are eligible for in addition to federal-based aid. So institutional aid being sometimes merit scholarships, sometimes other types of scholarships. For instance, we do have performing arts grants, so the question about the instruments is if you do play an instrument, Sacred Heart, you could qualify for some scholarships there, or if you're involved in any performing arts entity. Some of the merit scholarships that institutions own, you don't have to apply separately for. Many of them, your application serves as a merit scholarship application as well too. And if you have a high enough GPA, whether it be coming in from high school or an even transfer institution, you will be awarded a merit scholarship appropriately to that GPA. So that's something to consider there. One thing I want to plug with RCC, just because we've been working with them a lot this year in our transfer office, is they do offer special awards for students graduating from sometimes the honor societies there and so forth. And so those can be, they're not awards from the institution, but they can be applied to that institution. So they can get a merit scholarship from the institution that they transfer to, and then also have a scholarship coming from the institution that they're transferring out of to help cover the costs.
One thing I would say about financial aid, at this point, you're comparing apples to oranges, to kumquats, to strawberries, to mangoes, to pineapples. We're all going to have different numbers, we're all going to have different packages. You have to wait until pretty much March, April-ish of the year you get accepted and get all your acceptance letters to really get that finite, what is it going to cost you at each institution, and then you can start to compare apples to apples. So for instance, the highest merit scholarship that Marist has is $15,000. So if another institution offers you 25, that's well more than the top scholarship I have. However, when you put that top scholarship on that institution and then put mine on mine, I may be significantly lower than that other institution. So you have to take that in mind as you're going through it. Some of those numbers you're not going to know until you get accepted to those institutions. So I always tell parents and students, if it's where you want to go, you should apply, go through the process, and then understand when the numbers come back, what it's going to cost you and your family. Another piece I'll plug really quickly is private scholarships. There's over $100 million in private scholarships out there that go wherever you go. There's scholarships if you're left-handed, there's scholarships if you wear glasses, there's scholarships if you're above 6'3", if you're below 5'2". There's a scholarship for every hair color, every ethnicity, every major. Right now, and it's in that folder that you guys have, that your wonderful school counselors put together, is when you should start looking for some of those scholarships if you're a junior. So that way you get your timetables together, so that way you can go out and start looking for them. Unless it's the Ivies, most of us have endowed scholarships that will work with that, but I wouldn't rely solely on the institutions. Anything you can bring in will be of help to you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that we have a net price calculator, so you can use that as an early tool. So it's normally on the financial aid webpage. You're going to put in your student's GPA, their SAT scores, your family's income, a few other questions. And in about 15 minutes, it's going to give you an estimate of what your family would expect to pay to attend Fordham University. In the last few years that we've had it, about 80% of the cases, that estimate was within $2,000, give or take, of what the final package that family received. So it's a good estimate of what you can expect to pay, so you can see which schools are within reason for your family, and which ones maybe just are a long shot, maybe not worth pursuing at that point.
And
I do believe all colleges are, by law, required to have a net price calculator on their site. So you can go to any of our schools and plug that in.
Financial aid wise, is it okay to bargain sometimes, saying this school will give me more than what?
Yeah, you read my mind. So my advice on financial aid is, and again, it's going to be different from college to university to every school. So at Manhattan College, we really want students who want to be there. We're a small enough school that, you might take one of our business cards tonight and work with us from the beginning of the admissions process all the way through until May 1st, which is the national deadline deposit date. So sort of what we're going through right now is a fairly extensive appeal period. So families who say, you are my first choice, this is where I want to be, but you're this far out of reach or you're that far out of reach. And so, we're pretty realistic with families, and in many cases there might be extenuating circumstances or compelling reasons that your financial aid package becomes adjusted. So don't ask, don't get. It can't hurt to email the counselor that you met at a college fair or that you had an interview with, or give the Office of Admissions a call and say, hey, can you please take another look? So no, bargain.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question. It's a question that we get often regarding RCC and transferring. When students transfer after 2 years, we get word that, and I know, Julie, you mentioned it, is there academic money that they can get at the institution they're going to as a transfer student? So Dr. Lynch, do you see students who get academic money moving on after 2 years? And do all their credits transfer? So it kind of goes to the panel and to you. So we get that a lot in our office for students who are considering RCC.
Sure. Are you referring specifically to merit-based money, or?
Yes, merit-based money. So
I'll try to
forget financial aid as far as, if sometimes a student will graduate from here and will get this much, $10,000 in merit-based money. And then if they go from RCC, would they still be considered, let's say, for merit-based money with their RCC transcript?
Great, so it's a great question. In many ways, Julio's default answer applies. It does depend on the institution. So before I answer that specific question, RCC does itself have scholarships that it offers its own students. Every year, every March, there's a scholarship application process, and some of those scholarships are meant for students who are continuing on at RCC, and some of them are specifically earmarked for students who are going to transfer. Some of them are only for honor students, some of them are for students who are not in the honors program. So there's lots of ways for students to get some money, just from being an RCC student and applying for scholarships. The other thing that you can do is to join Phi Theta Kappa. It's different from Phi Beta Kappa, okay? So Phi Theta Kappa is the 2-year honor society, which is what you were referring to. And Phi Theta Kappa there will often be PTK scholarships at institutions. And so that's exactly what you're describing, and then the student who is a member of PTK, Phi Theta Kappa, can receive a certain amount of money, and sometimes it's quite substantial, over $10,000. So that's something to look into. Now, RCC's sort of metric for Phi Theta Kappa, you have to have a 3.6 or higher. And you don't have to be in the honors program for that. You can just be in that honors society. That's separate from the honors program. As for whether credits transfer. Oh, by the way, you also can fill out a FAFSA for RCC. Okay, you can get financial aid for RCC. It's possible. In terms of whether all credits transfer, it depends on the institution, and that's why what we try to do is we try to work with our students to help them navigate that with an admissions office. So they will be calling, someone at one of these schools and asking those kinds of questions. The sooner they can be doing that, the better. So when I tell some freshmen who are feeling really ambitious, I say, look, go and talk to or look at online, if you can find this information online, the schools that you're most passionate about, and then try to find some common denominators, right? If most of the schools and most of the programs that you're passionate about require, biology, a full year of biology and a full year of chemistry, make sure you take the full year of biology and the full year of chemistry. So we try to work within the parameters of our degree. We try to work with students individually. So most of the time, we're successful in having most credits transfer. There are some, cases, some exceptions to that. Transferring to Embry-Riddle, don't know if anybody knows, Embry-Riddle is basically a school where they're going to sort of teach you how to do aeronautics and to be pilots and to do, engineering relating to aerospace and that kind of stuff. And so some of his credits, he's had a little bit of a tough time transferring some of his credits because we, RCC, and the honors program in particular, are more of a liberal arts school than that school is. Right, so that's, but we've worked together to try to get him the credit that he needs. So again, we will do our best. The one thing I can tell you for sure is that in general we're successful with most credits, and if you go to another SUNY, your entire degree will transfer. Now, you have to make sure that you're still doing something similar to what you were doing at RCC. So for example, if you're in RCC as the humanities and social science student, and then you then decide that you want to do sort of pre-med at another SUNY, you might have a little bit of trouble there because you basically switched your major essentially. But otherwise that whole degree will transfer. That is a seamless transfer. That's a promise that SUNY makes, and it's wonderful.
Also, on SUNY.edu, there are transfer pathways, which are outlines. So for example, there is a transfer pathway for business, which shows students, if you're going to go to your local two-year community college, this is a core set of coursework that you could take at that institution. So it includes an intro to economics course, micro and macroeconomics, an intro to management course. I think statistics and calculus are on that list. If you want to be in a four-year business program at any SUNY institution, because pretty much across the board, all four-year business degrees require that set of coursework, so you know they're going to transfer in. There are another thing that you can look into are articulation agreements. And what those are pathways that have been created and laid out between a two-year institution and a four-year institution. Some of them will guarantee admission as long as you graduate from a particular degree program and have a certain GPA into a certain four-year institution. Others are really just roadmaps for ensuring that you're taking credits that are guaranteed to transfer. And not just transfer to the institution as elective credit, but degree applicable credit. So credits that are going to count towards degree completion in whatever program you're going into at the institution you eventually transfer into. So those are some things you can look into as well, and ask when you're touring four-year colleges if there are articulation agreements with Rockland or whatever two-year school you're looking at, so you can see if they're available to you.
Yeah, thanks. The articulation agreements was something I forgot, so I really appreciate that. We have articulation agreements with a lot of different schools, including Cornell's PALS, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, so that's one big one that a lot of our honor students end up going to, and there is a clear articulation agreement there. So definitely ask. We will again do our best to make sure that we're getting you the credit that you need.
Okay, I would like to thank you guys so much. You were absolutely fabulous.